Hello everyone and welcome to another draft class recap video. My name is Mark Burnell. Let's get started. Alright, today we're doing the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this is an interesting draft because for number one, you're going to notice that the board is a little bit harder to read. Hopefully not. I've moved the camera a little bit closer, but they had a lot of picks, so I had to try to fit it all on there, and this was a good test because some of the other teams have just as many, if not more, draft picks than this. I've been spoiled a little bit lately with some of the teams that only had 6 or 7 picks, but this is 12, and it's a pretty decent 12. So we're going to talk about that. The Jaguars are a team that are in flux, in transition, if you will, right now. Blake Bortles is gone. Leonard Fournette is on the chopping block. And this once stout championship caliber defense is no more. The Jaguars could be a case study of how fast a championship window can close in this league, as they are now trying to rebuild for another run. So looking at this team, the defense is pretty much empty heading into the draft, and the offense is young and mysterious when you have Gardner Minshew as the starting quarterback heading into the next season, with a wide receiver core that I don't want to say underperformed, but didn't perform up to what I thought the standards would be, especially guys like D.D. Westbrook. DJ Chark is fantastic, but outside of that, the offense doesn't have much. So they went into this draft needing a lot of pieces almost everywhere. And this is how it went. And I think it went pretty well. So we're going to start with round one, pick number 9, C.J. Henderson, corner from Florida. Henderson was a guy I was looking at pretty early on in this process. I did a video on him back in August. He was one of the first players that I did a film room episode on. And the knock against him is the tackling. But when he said at the combine that NFL teams give big-time corner extensions to people who can cover, that's when I was convinced that, yes, that is true, and that is why he's going to go top 10 in the draft. So in my mocks leading up to the draft, about a week or two, I had him pretty much solidified to the Jaguars at number 9, and it came to fruition. C.J. Henderson finished his career at Florida, 93 tackles, 6 interceptions, and 20 passes defended. He was the 4th overall corner in the SEC for passes defended last year with a total of 11. So he'll be taking over the role of Jalen Ramsey in this defense, hopefully. Moving on, their second first-round pick number 20 overall, they went with Devon Hamilton, the edge rusher from LSU. The disparity between Chase Young and the next available edge rusher in this draft was pretty significant. Devon Hamilton is a pretty decent edge rusher. He can do a lot of things. I think he's probably best as a stand-up 3-4 outside linebacker. Maybe that's just me. But Devon Hamilton is a quality product coming out of LSU. Finished his career with 92 tackles, 9.5 sacks. He was second in the SEC for tackles for loss last year with 14, and he was also 6th in sacks last year in the SEC with 6.5. So he is a disruptor. He is a guy that is going to be involved in the play, and he can get in the backfield pretty much at will. So this is a fantastic pick to rebuild this defensive line. Moving on in the second round, they decided to help out the offense. Pick 42, Laviticus Jr., wide receiver from Colorado. If we were to call Isaiah Simmons the defensive player who defensive coaches were unsure what to do with, Laviticus Jr. is probably the offensive version of that in this draft. Not that they don't know exactly what to do with him, but he doesn't really have a defined role. Think like Percy Harvin, a jack of all trades, master of none type of player. Or maybe we just find out this year that Laviticus is actually a really good wide receiver, and his quarterback play last year from Steve Montez was just garbage. So that will be a question that gets answered. But I really do like Laviticus Jr. I had him pegged as a first-round pick a couple months ago. But as we saw, this wide receiver class was very good, so he got knocked down a little bit. Shenault finished his college career with 149 receptions, 1,943 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Also had 7 rushing touchdowns, so there's that dynamic factor peaking up a little bit. And he finished top 10 in several categories not last year, but in 2018. Those were receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. Last year, in 2019, he was 10th in the Pac-12 for receiving yards with 764. Moving on to the third round, pick 73, Devon Hamilton, defensive tackle from Ohio State. Finished his career in college with 66 tackles and 7 sacks. Nothing really, no real statistical category that I could point out to you where he's super excelled and finished high in his conference. Pretty much just an interior run stuffer who will be used on the defensive line. Moving on at round 4, they got 3 picks. Pick 116 is Ben Bartch, offensive tackle from St. John. He came on late in the year because he got invited to the Senior Bowl. They threw every kind of defensive player that they could at him, and he excelled. And he also had that really gross what do you call it? Not energy drink, workout drink. I don't know. I don't drink that crap with eggs and yogurt and Gatorade, whatever. But that was super disgusting. And but anyway, yeah, he really had a good Senior Bowl. A lot of people even thought that he could have been a higher pick than this, but he's still an experimental offensive tackle who's going to take a long time to develop. Kind of interesting that they waited this long to address the offensive line, and they went with this particular player who, as I said, is going to need some time to develop. So, but I guess they believe in him, and why not? He had a really good Senior Bowl week. Moving on to their second, 4th round pick, pick 137, Josiah Scott, corner from Michigan State. Finished his career with 95 tackles, 6 interceptions, 22 passes defended. Second in the Big Ten last year for interceptions with 3. Very good choice. I like the way that the secondary is being rebuilt. We're going to talk about another secondary player here in a second, but C.J. Henderson with Josiah Scott is what this team needs. Up until recently, the only notable name in the secondary for this team was A.J. Abuye, and then I think they traded him. I can't remember for sure. Moving on, pick 140, Shaquan Quarterman, linebacker for Miami. I like this pick. This guy is a very good player. Finished his career with 356 tackles, 12 sacks, 13 passes defended, and he finished his career as the number 8 in tackles for ACC all time. So he's a tackling machine. He'll probably be one of those interior off-ball linebackers, sort of the Patrick Willis role, if you will. Moving on to the 5th round, pick 157, Daniel Thomas, safety from Auburn. 199 tackles in his career, 5 interceptions and 9 passes defended. 8 passes defended. Don't want to get called out for that. And as I said before, the secondary needed to be rebuilt. It had nothing going into this draft. And Daniel Thomas will be a good selection. Speaking of good selections, pick 165, Colin Johnson, wide receiver for Texas. I'm kind of surprised he fell this far, but maybe it just has to do with the sort of average production per year for him. He did have a good college career, finished 188 receptions, 2,624 yards, and 15 touchdowns. So he'll be a good addition to this offense. So this wide receiver group now has DJ Chark, D.D. Westbrook, Laviticus Chenault Jr., Colin Johnson. That's improved, I think. I think Gardner Minshew, if he is a serious contender to be an NFL quarterback, long-term starter in this league, he should progress a little bit this year with a better influx of weapons. Moving on, picked round 6, pick 189, Jake Luton, quarterback from Oregon State. Played 1 year at Idaho before transferring. Interesting career, 496 completions, 5,630 yards, 43 touchdowns, only threw 15 picks. He was 4th overall in passing touchdowns last year in Pac-12 with 28. So he's a project quarterback and they felt like they hit in the 6th round with Minshew last year. Maybe they'll hit again with Luton here in the 6th round as well. Moving on to pick 206, Tyler Davis, tight end from Georgia Tech. Only a 1-year starter at Georgia Tech, spent a lot of his time at UConn. But for his career, he had 64 receptions for 648 yards and 8 touchdowns. His per-year production was not very great. He excelled the year before he transferred to Georgia Tech with, I think it was like 6 touchdowns that year. And then when he got to Georgia Tech, he only got 1. So definitely a project tight end in a tight end class that was pretty weak to begin with. Last pick of the day, round 7, pick 223, Chris Claybrooks, the corner from Memphis. 54 tackles, a half a sack, and 2 interceptions. Also has some kick return experience, so he'll probably be a special teams player from this moment going forward. So that is the 2020 NFL draft for the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's an interesting group. I think it's just a lot of pieces that they needed to fill. You figure that when you have to draft to fill a roster, it kind of is not as advantageous as a team that has a pretty good roster and can just draft whatever the hell they want and have all of these luxury picks. But the Jaguars are basically rebuilding from scratch, and they've got a long way to go. And I think this draft is a good step in the right direction. It just depends on what the quarterback situation is going to be in a year from now. So we'll see. Maybe they tank for Trevor Lawrence. Who knows? All right, so that's going to do it for the Jacksonville Jaguars draft class recap. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.